Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Philosophizing with a Hammer. Today we are continuing in our series on existentialism, and we're going to have a look at, objectively speaking, it is actually Dostoevsky's greatest work, taking into consideration his life and the profound impact it had on his writings. I guess Notes from Underground, it really sums up Dostoevsky's lives and philosophies in a nutshell. So we're going to explore the tortured musings of the underground man and analyze his philosophy through the lens of Friedrich Nietzsche. What can this 19th century novel teach us about the human condition today? So Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground, which was published in 1864, is a work that holds a unique position in the history of ideas. It is often regarded as one of the first existentialist works, predating the major contributions of philosophers like Nietzsche, Sartre, and Heidegger. Yet, even though Dostoevsky and Nietzsche never directly influenced each other, their thoughts often resonate in uncanny ways. Nietzsche actually discovered Dostoevsky at a later stage in his life, after he had already written most of his major works. Nietzsche first encountered Dostoevsky in 1887, only a couple of years before his mental collapse in 89. And by this time, he had completed Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Beyond Good and Evil, The Genealogy of Morality, and most of his major works. Nietzsche came across Dostoevsky through the French translation of Notes from Underground, Souvenir de la Maison des Morts, and immediately recognized him as a kindred spirit. In a letter to his friend Franz Overbeck, Nietzsche famously wrote that Dostoevsky, here I quote, Dostoevsky, the only psychologist from whom I had anything to learn. This is a remarkable statement considering Nietzsche's own profound psychological insights. Nietzsche admired Dostoevsky's deep understanding of human psychology, especially his exploration of guilt, his suffering, and the darker aspects of the human condition. Despite their different cultural and intellectual contexts too, both thinkers delved into similar existential themes, such as the struggle for individuality, the critique of societal norms, and the tension between freedom and determinism. Interestingly, Nietzsche's discovery of Dostoevsky came after he had already developed many of his core philosophical ideas, as we said. So Nietzsche has articulated his critiques of Enlightenment rationality, herd mentality, herd morality, and Christian values long before he read Dostoevsky. However, Dostoevsky's works, particularly Notes from Underground, likely reinforced and deepened Nietzsche's understanding of these themes. Their shared skepticism of utopian visions and emphasis on the irrational, contradictory nature of human beings undoubtedly resonated with Nietzsche. And while Nietzsche focused more on the constructive potential of overcoming societal norms, as seen in the concept of the Übermensch, Dostoevsky's works often explored the psychological torment of the individual's caught between freedom and despair. In summary, Nietzsche's encounter with Dostoevsky was late but highly influential moment in his intellectual journey. It validated and expanded his insights into human nature, adding a new layer of psychological depth to his understanding of existential struggles. So, both men were grappling with the crisis of meaning and identity brought about by the decline of traditional values in the 19th century. Now, back to Notes from Underground. It is a novel in which serves as a psychological exploration of a deeply conflicted and self-destructive narrator, often referred to as the underground man. The work is divided into two parts, underground and apropos of the wet snow. That's the second part. So, let's get into it, and dare I say, this might be a little uncomfortably relatable. The underground man, who is he? He is the protagonist of our novel. He is a retired civil servant in his 40s, living in St. Petersburg, but he is no ordinary narrator. This guy spends most of his time overthinking overanalyzing and spiraling into self-loathing. He is bitter, he is misanthropic, and painfully self-aware of that. In the first part of the book, the underground man shares his worldview. He despises the idea that human beings can be reduced to rational creatures who will always act in their best interest. He argues that people are complex, often irrational, and driven by desires that go against logic. Ever heard of someone cutting off their nose to spite their face? Well, that's the underground man's whole vibe. Part 2 of the novel, which is the wet snow incident, it's a glimpse actually into the underground man's life. In this part, we shift from abstract philosophy to real-life events. The underground man recounts episodes from his past that illustrate his inner turmoil. Let me set the scene. He is socially awkward, desperate for validation, but also full of contempt for the very people he seeks it from. One of the most powerful moments comes when he meets Lisa, a young prostitute. He initially tries to assert control over her by delivering a scathing critique of her life. But as the conversation unfolds, something unexpected happens. Lisa's humanity shines through. For a moment, there's a chance for connection and redemption. But remember, this is the underground man. He sabotages the relationship, rejecting her and himself in the process. By the end, he's alone. He's left to stew in his misery and regret. It's a brutal but honest portrayal of self-destruction and alienation. The underground man, the protagonist and the narrator of Notes from Underground, serves as Dostoevsky's critique of Enlightenment rationalism. The Enlightenment, with its emphasis on reason, progress, scientific inquiry, painted a picture of a humanity moving toward a utopia. This utopia was built on logic and universal principle. It suggests that given enough knowledge and reason, human beings could solve all of their problems, organize society perfectly, and eliminate suffering. Well, as we have seen in the other episode, Raskolnikov would disagree with that. So does the underground man. But Dostoevsky, through the voice of the underground man, challenges this vision. The underground man is deeply alienated and self-aware individual who lives in opposition to this optimism. He scorns the idea that human beings can be reduced to mathematical formulas or that their behavior can be fully explained or controlled by rational principles. In this way, Dostoevsky anticipates Nietzsche's critique of Enlightenment rationalism, which Nietzsche explores in the works like Birth of Tragedy and Beyond Good and Evil. Nietzsche, like Dostoevsky, was deeply skeptical of the belief that reason and science could address the deeper existential needs of the human soul. In Birth of Tragedy, for example, Nietzsche introduces the idea of the Apollonian and Dionysian forces. The former, which is the Apollonian, represents order, reason, structure, Socratism, let's say. And the latter, the Dionysian, represents chaos, passion, and the irrational. Nietzsche argues that the suppression of the Dionysian in favor of pure Apollonian rationality leads to a shallow and lifeless culture. Okay, to bluntly explain it, we can think of Apollonian or Apollo, which is the god of reason, the sun, as reason itself, order. Think of people like Socrates, who think that with order, with reason alone, you can get the answers to everything in life. And think of the Dionysian, which is Dionysus, the god of wine, of celebration, of parties, as the antithesis of that. Now, Nietzsche, nor Dostoevsky, they do not champion one in favor of the other. No, they state that there should be a balance between the two in order to have a great life and a successful one. The underground man rejects the sterile, let's say, rationalism of his time that focuses only on rationality. insisting that human beings are driven by irrational desires, emotions, most importantly, and a need for meaning that transcends logic. This is basically the side where we talk about Dionysus. Think of it like you have a job and you strive hard to work for that job. I don't mean a 9-to-5 job, I mean anything that you spend your whole life working on. Might be a project. Think of it this way. You cannot spend your whole life doing that because eventually, according to Nietzsche, there will come a time where you're gonna collapse. Something that we call in our modern times burnout. That's why Dionysus is needed. That's why emotions, fun, and parties are needed, basically. And when you could balance between the two, that's the right path to having a good life according to existentialist philosophy. For instance, in Notes from Underground, the underground man famously mocks the idea of Crystal Palace, a utopian vision of society where every aspect of a human life is perfectly organized and predictable. He writes, here I'm going to quote, "But do you know what is embarrassing? It is that really one can say anything about world history, anything that might enter the head of even the most disturbed imagination. There's only one thing that you can't ever say, not under any circumstances, that it's rational." End of quote. The underground man, for him, this utopian vision fails to account for the complexity of human nature. People, they're not machines. We are human beings. We do not always act in our best interest or according to reason. In fact, as the underground man insists, people often act irrationally simply to assert their freedom. This insistence on freedom, even at the expense of one's well-being, is one of the most Nietzschean aspects of the underground man and his philosophy. Nietzsche, in Beyond Good and Evil, criticizes the herd mentality of modern society, where individuals are encouraged to conform to societal norms and suppress their unique desires and ambitions. He sees this conformity as a betrayal of the human spirit's deepest potential. Similarly, the underground man rebels against the idea of living as a cog in a rational, utilitarian society. He recognizes the absurdity and self-destructiveness of his rebellion, but he clings to this idea as a way of affirming his individuality and authenticity, let's say. It's fascinating to consider how Dostoevsky's works anticipate Nietzsche's insights, while Nietzsche would later articulate the concept of the will to power, which is, as we said, the idea that humans are driven not merely by survival or pleasure, but by fundamental drive to assert themselves and create meaning. The underground man embodies this idea in a raw and chaotic form. He refuses to be reduced to a predictable set of desires or actions, even if it means sabotaging his own happiness. His declaration that man prefers to act in opposition to his best interest is a powerful rejection of utilitarianism, the philosophy that underpinned much of Enlightenment thinking. In this sense, Notes from Underground serves both as a critique of Enlightenment rationalism and a precursor to existentialist and Nietzschean thought. It is a deeply unsettling work because it confronts us with the darker aspects of human nature. That is, our capacity for self-destruction, our resistance to being solved or categorized, and our yearning for meaning in a world that often feels devoid of it. Dostoevsky's underground man might lack the constructive vision of Nietzsche's Übermensch, the figure who transcends societal norms to create new values, but he represents an important step in the journey towards that vision. He is a reminder that the human spirit cannot be fully captured by equations, by rules or systems, and that any philosophy that ignores our irrational and unpredictable nature is doomed to fail. At the heart of Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground lies a figure who defies easy categorization, the underground man. This deeply alienated, self-contradictory narrator, let's call him this way, embodies a profound rejection of societal norms and rationalist philosophies. His defining trait is his insistence on asserting his free will, even when it leads to self-sabotage and misery. And in this way, the underground man becomes an early literary counterpart to Nietzsche's philosophical ideas, particularly the concept of the will to power. Let's start with the underground man's striking declaration, which is, man only likes to count his troubles. He doesn't calculate his happiness. This statement reveals a central paradox of human nature. Unlike the rationalist philosophers of the Enlightenment who envisioned human beings as predictable happiness-seeking creatures, the underground man highlights our tendency to act irrationally and even destructively. His perspective challenges the utilitarian idea that humans aim for the greatest happiness for the greatest number. Instead, he suggests that human beings often prioritize their autonomy, their authenticity, and the assertion of their individuality over their own well-being. This aligns very, very closely with Nietzsche's idea of the will to power, as you have seen in previous episodes. This idea that goes beyond the simplistic pursuit of pleasure or avoidance of pain. For Nietzsche, as a small reminder, the will to power is the fundamental drive behind human actions. That is the desire to assert one's existence and overcome obstacles, as well as create meaning in a chaotic world. Importantly, this drive is not inherently rational. It often manifests in ways that defy logic or societal expectations. The underground man exemplifies this through his seemingly irrational behavior. He deliberately acts against his own interests, rejecting love, sabotaging relationships, isolating himself, being alienated, as a way to assert his freedom and individuality. One of the most vivid examples of this occurs when the underground man recounts his deliberate decision to refuse medical help for a toothache. Even though he knows it would alleviate his suffering, why does he do this, one might ask? Well, because he explains it. He explains that the act of enduring pain becomes a twisted affirmation of his autonomy. And by refusing the logical solution, he asserts that no external force, whether reason, society, or biology, can dictate his actions. This echoes actually Nietzsche's belief that human greatness lies not in comfort or conformity, but in the capacity to rise above external pressures and carve out a unique path, let's say. Another key theme in the novel is how the underground man's critique of utilitarianism is presented. Utilitarian thinkers like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill argued that human actions should be guided by the principle of maximizing happiness for the greatest number of people. This is the main idea behind utilitarianism. And to the underground man, this philosophy represents a profound misunderstanding of human nature. He mocks the idea of a utopian society where all human desires are satisfied through rational planning, likening it to a crystal palace that leaves no room for individual freedom or unpredictability. And the underground man's rejection of utilitarianism resonates again with Nietzsche's critique of the herd morality. Nietzsche believed that the values imposed by society often prioritize mediocrity and conformity at the expense of individuality and greatness. Utilitarianism, with its emphasis on the collective happiness, risks reducing individuals to mere components of a societal machine, stripped of their unique aspirations, their struggles, and their contradictions. The underground man's defiance of this vision, while self-destructive, can be seen as a proto-Nietzschean rebellion against the tyranny of the herd. However, unlike Nietzsche's Übermensch, who transcends societal norms to create new values, the underground man is trapped in a cycle of self-loathing and inaction. He rejects society but cannot offer an alternative. His suffering becomes a kind of existential rebellion, a refusal to accept the reductive logic of a world that seeks to categorize and control him. Let's consider this famous assertion in the book, and I quote, "What man wants is simply independent choice, whatever the independence may cost and wherever it may lead." End of quote. Now, for the underground men, this is the essence of freedom, not the calculated pursuit of happiness, but the ability to act unpredictably, even irrationally, in defiance of societal expectations. This sentiment finds an echo in Nietzsche's idea that true freedom lies in the capacity to create one's own values and live authentically, rather than conforming to the preordained roles imposed by society or religion. In many ways, the underground men's rebellion highlights the darker side of Nietzschean philosophy. While Nietzsche celebrates the creative and transformative potential of the will to power, Dostoevsky shows what it happens when this drive becomes trapped in a vacuum. The underground man's self-destructive behavior reveals the dangers of rejecting societal norms without finding a higher purpose to replace them. His story serves as both a critique and a complement to Nietzsche's vision, offering a cautionary tale about the existential isolation that can arise when individuals prioritize freedom at all costs. Ultimately, the underground man's defiance and suffering force us to confront uncomfortable truths about the human condition. Like Nietzsche, Dostoevsky challenges us to question the assumptions of modern society, its faith in reason and progress and collective happiness, and to grapple with the messy, unpredictable nature of human freedom. The underground men may not embody the Übermensch, but this struggle against the constraints of rationalism and herd morality is a powerful reminder of the complexity and depth of the human spirit. In this sense, Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground remains as relevant today as it was in the 19th century, perhaps even more so. The underground man, with all his contradictions, alienation and defiance, embodies the themes that resonate deeply in our modern world. His struggles mirror the challenges of living in an era marked by unprecedented technological advancement, hyperconnectivity, and social pressure to conform. And one of the most striking aspects of Notes from Underground is its portrayal of alienation. The underground man is a deeply isolated figure, trapped in a state of self-imposed exile from the world around him. While this alienation was a reaction to the societal shifts of Dostoevsky's time, it feels eerily familiar in today's hyper-connected world. Despite, let's say, social media in general, for example, instant messaging and all of that, many people experience profound loneliness and disconnection, right? And the paradox of our age is that we are more connected than ever, yet many of us feel isolated, much like the underground men, who watches the world from the shadows but refuses to participate in it. The underground men's refusal to conform to societal expectations make him a prototype for a Nietzschean figure, much like the Nietzschean Übermensch. He challenges the norms of his society, rejecting utilitarianism, rationalism, and the pursuit of collective happiness. And in today's world, this defiance can be seen in individuals who resist societal pressures to conform to predefined paths, let's say, whether those pressures come in the form of consumer culture, social media algorithms, or rigid career expectations. The underground man's rejection of the Crystal Palace is a critique that feels timeless. It warns us against the dangers of utopian visions that prioritize efficiency and order over human individuality and freedom. However, there is a darker side to the underground man's rebellion that also speaks to our time. Unlike Nietzsche's Übermensch, who rises above societal norms to create new values and live authentically, the underground man is paralyzed by his own intellect. His relentless overthinking leads to inaction and bitterness. This paralysis is a warning for us today. In a world that often rewards overanalysis and endless critique, we risk becoming like the underground men, trapped in our mind, unable to translate our ideas into meaningful actions. Consider how this theme plays out in the context of our digital age. The constant stream of information, opinions, comparisons can lead to what psychologists call analysis paralysis. So it means the sheer volume of choices and possibilities prevent us from making decisions. The underground man's internal monologues, full of self-doubt and contradiction, echo the experience of modern individuals bombarded by conflicting messages and societal expectations. His paralysis reminds us of the dangers of becoming so consumed by introspection and critique that we lose the ability to engage with the world meaningfully. Another theme that feels especially relevant today is the underground man's insistence on unpredictability and free will. In an era dominated by algorithms, AI, technological determinism, where our preferences and are predicted and shaped by data, the underground man's refusal to be predictable feels almost revolutionary. His famous question here, and I quote, "What if man wants something that is not in his best interest?" End of quote. This is a challenge to our obsession with optimization and efficiency. And modern society often promotes the idea of maximizing productivity and minimizing discomfort. From fitness apps that track every calorie, for example, to algorithms that curate our entertainment and shopping choices, there's a pervasive belief that our lives can and should be optimized. But the underground man resists this logic. He insists that human beings are not machines, that our greatest acts of freedom often came from defining what is rational or efficient. His rebellion against the idea of a perfect, logical world is a reminder that unpredictability and creativity and even chaos are essential aspects of the human experience. The underground man's question about choosing what is not in one's best interest also resonates in today's discussion about autonomy and agency. Do we truly have free will, or are all our choices shaped by external forces? That is, the societal expectations, economic systems, and increasingly algorithms. Well, the underground man's insistence on acting against his best interest can be seen as a demand for genuine freedom, the kind of freedom that cannot be reduced to data points or portabilities. And in this sense, Notes from Underground challenges us to think critically about the systems and structures that govern our lives. It asks us to consider whether we have traded our freedom for convenience and whether the pursuit of efficiency has come at the cost of our humanity. The underground man and his defiance may be messy, may be irrational and self-destructive, but it serves as a powerful reminder that true freedom often requires stepping outside the boundaries of logic and societal norms. And finally, Notes from Underground also speaks to the existential crisis of our identity and purpose that many people face today. In a world where traditional sources of meaning, like religion, like community and shared values, are increasingly fragmented, individuals are often left to navigate their own paths. The underground man's existential struggle reflects the difficulty, let's say, of finding a meaning in a world that feels indifferent and chaotic. His story invites us to confront these questions head on. How do we create meaning in our lives, basically? How do we reconcile our desire for individuality with the need for connection? How do we balance freedom with responsibility? How do we balance Apollo and Dionysus? In the end, Notes from Underground is not just a critique of the 19th century society, it is a mirror held up to our own time. And the underground man and his struggles, along with the questions that he poses, continue to challenge us to think deeply about the human condition and the kind of world we want to create. Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground may be a dark and unsettling work, but it is also deeply instructive. Beneath its bleakness and the underground man's relentless self-loathing lies a set of profound lessons to resonate with our modern world. Let us explore these insights in detail. One of the most striking aspects of the underground man is his painful honesty about his flaws and contradiction. He spares no details in exposing the messiness of his inner life, even when it casts him into an unflattering light. While his self-awareness often leads to self-sabotage, it makes him one of the literature's most brutally authentic characters. This shall bring us to talk about the importance of authenticity in our today's world. This kind of honesty is a rarity in today's world, and the age of social media has fostered a culture of curated perfection where people often present idealized versions of their lives, free of flaws or struggles, and the pressure to appear successful, to appear happy and put together, can leave little room for vulnerability and authenticity. Yet, the underground man's unvarnished portrayal of his inner turmoil reminds us that to be human is to be imperfect, to be contradictory and sometimes irrational. Authenticity, as uncomfortable as it may be, is crucial for genuine self-understanding and connection with the others. The underground man's refusal to sugarcoat, let's say, his rationality and reality is a call to embrace the full spectrum of a human experience. That is the good, the bad, and the ugly. A very good movie, though. And in doing so, we allow ourselves to live more honestly, let's say, and meaningfully, unburdened by the need to project a false image of perfection. Another powerful lesson from Notes from Underground is the transformative potential of struggle. That is the value of the struggle itself. Nietzsche's famous maxim, that is, what doesn't kill you make you stronger, often serves as a lens through which to understand the underground man's suffering. While his pain is largely self-inflicted, it forces readers to confront an uncomfortable truth, which is the struggle and suffering. Both of them are often unavoidable, but they can also be sources of growth and self-discovery. In a culture that often seeks to avoid discomfort at all costs, whether through technological convenience, instant gratification, or the pursuit of constant happiness, this is a radical idea. And the underground man shows us that avoiding struggle can lead to stagnation and a shallow existence. By contrast, facing life's difficulties head on, and even when they are painful or chaotic, can deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world. For the underground man, suffering becomes a means of asserting his individuality. It is through his struggles, his toothache, his humiliation, his self-imposed exile, that he carves out a sense of identity, however flawed. While his approach is far from ideal, it reminds us that growth often comes from grappling with life's challenges, not from avoiding them. Perhaps one of the most actually important lesson from Notes from Underground is its call to embrace our freedom and responsibility. The underground man is a deeply flawed character, but he refuses to let external forces dictate his life. He is acutely aware of his agency, even when he uses it to act irrationally or destructively. This defiance, while tragic, underscores a profound truth. We are the authors of our own lives. In a world that often encourages us to blame external factors, the circumstances, the societal pressures, for our own problems, the underground man challenges us to take ownership of our own choices. He questions, and I quote, "What if man wants something that is not in his best interest?" This is a reminder that true freedom includes the ability to make mistakes, to act against logic. And with freedom, however, comes responsibility. The underground man's life is a cautionary tale of what can happen when we misuse our freedom, when we let bitterness and resentment take the reins. His story reminds us that while we cannot control all the circumstances of our lives, we can choose how we respond to them. Whether we use our freedom to create or to isolate is ultimately up to us. These lessons are particularly relevant in today's world and the rapid changement that is happening. In an era defined by constant connectivity, instant gratification, and societal pressures, Notes from Underground urges us to slow down, to reflect, and embrace the complexities of life. It challenges us to be authentic, even when it's comfortable, to see the struggle not as something to be avoided, but as an opportunity for growth, and most importantly, to take ownership of our own lives, rather than surrendering our agency to external forces. Ultimately, Dostoevsky's novel is a reminder that freedom and authenticity are not easy paths, but they are essential ones. And by confronting the darkness within ourselves, as the underground man does, we can begin to live more honestly and meaningfully. Thank you all for joining me on this exploration of Dostoevsky, Nietzsche, and the existential questions that continue to shape our world. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with a fellow thinker. And remember, as Nietzsche might say, we have art in order not to die from truth. One of my favorite quotes that is often attributed to Nietzsche. Until next time, keep philosophizing. Signing off.